Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated his offer to mediate what he called the explosive situation in Kashmir. Talking to reporters in the Oval Office, Trump said the complicated Kashmir situation has a lot to do with religion. Trump said he would raise the matter with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the G7 summit in France over the weekend.
I think we're helping the situation, but there's tremendous problems between those two countries, as you know, and I will do the best I can to mediate or do something. Great relationship with both of them, but they are not exactly friends at this moment. Complicated situation. A lot has to do with religion. Religion's a complicated subject.
Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has called on India to release thousands of detained Kashmiris and restore their basic liberties. Moving on, Indian occupation forces have martyred 2 more civilians in Kashmir. They were martyred during a search operation in Baramulla. This comes after the occupation forces arrested 30 more people during clashes in Srinagar. More than 4,000 Kashmiris have been detained in the last 17 days, and strict curfew is still in the place. Meanwhile, pro-freedom Kashmiri leaders have called for a mass march on Friday against India's illegal revocation of Kashmir's special status. The leaders in occupied Valley said rally will move towards office of the UN Military Observer Group in Srinagar. The 9th round of Afghan peace talks between the US and Taliban are set to resume in Doha over the weekend. US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said he will try to finalize an agreement on remaining issues. Khalilzad said he has briefed the Trump administration on the negotiations with the Taliban and discussed the next steps. After meeting with the Taliban in Qatar, Khalilzad will travel to Kabul to consult with the Afghan government. The U.S. has said it will prevent a recently released Iranian oil tanker from delivering its cargo to Syria. The tanker Grace 1 was released by Gibraltar on Sunday after being detained for 5 weeks. U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo has said Washington will act if the tanker heads to Syria.
The United States has a set of sanctions that preclude crude oil from being shipped to any country. We've made clear anyone who touches it, anyone who supports it, anyone who allows a ship to dock is at risk of receiving sanctions from the United States of America. So if that ship, again, heads to Syria, we'll take every action we can consistent with those sanctions.
The U.S. has warned Greece and all Mediterranean ports against helping the Iranian vessel. Greek Deputy Foreign Minister has said Athens will not facilitate the tanker in delivering oil to Syria. Now moving on, Australia has agreed to join a U.S.-led military coalition aimed at protecting oil tankers and cargo shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Canberra will send troops, a plane and a warship to the Persian Gulf. Australia will send a surveillance plane for 1 month before the end of 2019. An Australian frigate will also be deployed in January 2020 for 6 months. Morrison says the time-limited contribution is in Australia's national and economic interests.
This destabilising behaviour is a threat to Australian interests in the region, particularly our enduring interest in the security of global sea lanes of communication. 15 to 16% of crude oil and 25 to 30% of refined oil destined for Australia transits through the Straits of Hormuz. So it is a potential threat to our economy.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has urged the UN to extend an arms embargo on Tehran that is due to expire next year as part of the Iran nuclear deal. Now moving on to Sudan, where the outgoing head of the Military Council, General Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, has sworn in as the leader of the newly formed 11-member Sovereign Council. The remaining 10 members of the Council and the Prime Minister-designate, Abdullah Hamdouk, will take oaths later today. A power-sharing agreement was signed between opposition and the military last week, paving the way for a transitional government and the elections. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim they have shot down a U.S. drone in southeast of the capital, Sana'a. The group's Al Masira TV said the MQ-9 drone was brought down in a Houthi-controlled area of Damar Governorate. In a statement, the U.S. military's Central Command said it was aware of the reports but declined to give further information. Meanwhile, UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths has warned that Yemen is in danger of breaking apart.
The fragmentation of Yemen is becoming a stronger and more pressing threat. And this, of course, makes our efforts in the Yemeni peace process more urgent than ever. And there is no time to lose. The stakes are becoming too high for the future of Yemen, the Yemeni people, and indeed the wider region.
His statement comes after separatists seized the port city of Aden and two government military bases near the adjacent provincial capital of Zanzibar. Now moving on, China has announced to impose sanctions on U.S. firms selling arms to Taiwan. Earlier, the U.S. State Department formally approved a major $8 billion sale of F-16 fighter jets to Taiwan. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the deal includes 66 aircraft and 75 General Electric engines. The agency said the deal will help Taiwan maintain a credible defense. Taiwan's president said the sale will help the country build a new air force and boost its air defense capacity. China has already denounced the widely discussed sale and warned of serious consequences in response. Beijing considers Taiwan a renegade province. The foreign ministers of China, Japan and South Korea have held trilateral cooperation talks in Beijing in the first such meeting since 2016. The meeting was held amid an escalating trade row between Seoul and Tokyo. During the meeting, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the three countries should address their issues constructively through dialogue. Japan's Foreign Minister Taro Kono said bilateral differences must not impede trilateral cooperation. South Korea's Kang Kwon-woo said the trilateral dialogue should contribute to peace on the Korean peninsula and strengthen free trade. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, met his South Korean counterpart to discuss the resumption of nuclear talks with Pyongyang. Italian President Sergio Mattarella has started two-day talks with parties to seek a way out of political crisis. Mattarella will now decide if he wants to call early elections or try to put together a new coalition. Earlier, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte announced his resignation after weeks of political turmoil. It came after the ruling coalition's League Party planned a no-confidence motion against the government. Conte accused Interior Minister Matteo Salvini of sinking the coalition for personal and political gains. Nearly 100 migrants stranded on the rescue ship off the coast of Lampedusa have disembarked on the Italian island. This comes after Italian prosecutors ordered the seizure of the open arms and evacuation of migrants. Officials said the decision was made due to the difficult situation on board. It came shortly after Spain said it is sending a naval vessel to escort the ship to Mallorca. Italy had refused to allow the ship from docking, though some miners and sick had been taken ashore. Earlier, about 10 migrants jumped off the ship, hoping to swim to the island. The Open Arms welcomed the decision, which ended a 19-day standoff between the Spanish charity and the government in Rome. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has asked the European Union to scrap the Irish border backstop provision of the Brexit agreement. Responding to Johnson, European Council President Donald Tusk says he has given no realistic alternatives to the Irish backstop. Details in this report.
In a letter to the European Council President Donald Tusk, the British Prime Minister called the backstop plan undemocratic. Tusk has accused Prime Minister Johnson of pushing towards border checks in Ireland after Brexit. He says those against the backstop in fact support re-establishing a border.
We also note that the letter does not provide a legal operational solution to prevent the return of a hard border on the island of Ireland. It does not set out what any alternative arrangements could be, and in fact it recognises that there is no guarantee that such arrangements will be in place by the end of the transitional period.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the EU will think about the practical solution of post-Brexit border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Merkel said renegotiating the withdrawal agreement will not be required.
Boris Johnson referred to the backstop issue, but that isn't new. The British Parliament has also addressed it. The moment we have a practical arrangement on how to preserve the Good Friday Agreement and at the same time define the borders of the internal market, we would not need the backstop anymore.
Earlier, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said the backstop provision cannot be changed.
Former Vatican Treasurer Cardinal George Pell has lost a legal appeal against his sex abuse convictions in Australia. Pell, the highest-ranking Catholic to be convicted of child sexual offences, will remain in prison for at least another 3 years. Pell was sentenced in March to 6 years in jail after being found guilty on 5 charges of abusing 2 boys. Pell appealed his conviction to Victoria's Court of Appeal on 3 grounds. He argued the jury's verdict was unreasonable. His appeal was dismissed by a panel of 3 judges in Victoria's Court of Appeal.
By a majority of 2 to 1, the Court of Appeal has dismissed Cardinal George Pell's appeal against his conviction for the commission of sexual offences. He will continue to serve his sentence of 6 years imprisonment.
The 78-year-old Australian prelate will now consider a final appeal in the nation's highest court. Moving on, US President Donald Trump has cancelled his visit to Denmark after it rejected his proposed purchase of Greenland. Trump was scheduled to hold talks with the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, in early September. In a tweet, Trump said his trip was on hold because Frederiksen was not interested in selling Greenland to the US. The Danish Prime Minister has called the idea absurd. It's a time for a short break, but coming up next in the Bulletin. Bowing to pressure from environmentally conscious consumers. An exhibition of art inspired by iconic pop star Michael Jackson. Welcome back. 17 more victims of Saturday's suicide bombing of a Kabul wedding have succumbed to their injuries. This raises the death toll from the attack to 80. Afghan Interior Ministry spokesperson Nusrat Rahimi said over 160 are still being treated either in hospitals or at home. ISIS had claimed the responsibility for the bombing. A displaced Syrian teacher gives classes at an internally displaced persons camp in Idlib. Conditions at school after arriving in Atme, a camp for IDPs, were never ideal for the students. This report has the details.
An outdoor school under the olive trees was set up by Muhammad, a teacher who was seeking refuge in a camp. The idea was to teach children who have limited access to education due to war. The flare-up in attacks has taken away even the option of a makeshift school in mosque and other buildings.
We fled to the region of Atme around 4 months ago, and we came here under the olive trees. I saw the suffering of the children, so I tried to take a charitable decision to make a school under the olive trees. The idea was welcomed so that the children can continue the studies as they were doing at school before they fled.
As children learn to read and write under the olive trees in an outdoor setting, it gives them hope. The residents of the camp look forward to a truce in the region so they could resume to normal life. Meanwhile, the basic education is being imparted to children at the camp.
My dream is that there is a school here with enough seats, tents, stationery for the students, so the young generation can continue with their studies and our revolution will continue with them.
According to UNICEF, more than 2.5 million Syrian children have fled the country since fighting began. Some groups put the number of children killed at over 20,000.
Wildfires raging in Brazil's Amazon rainforest have hit a record number this year amid increased deforestation. The surge in wildfires has occurred since President Jair Bolsonaro took office in January, vowing to develop the region for farming and mining. According to the country's space research agency, nearly 73,000 fires were recorded between January and August. It says nearly 40,000 fires were reported in 2018. The current year records the highest number of forest fires since 2013. Thick smoke has blanketed several cities in recent days. Conservationists have blamed Bolsonaro, saying he has encouraged loggers and farmers to clear the land. In Iceland, a meeting between the leaders of the 7 Nordic countries on climate change has ended. The meeting was called after a glacier in Iceland melted away for the first time in history. More in this report.
The Öksjökull had existed for 700 years before it melted away just a few days ago. Environmentalists laid a commemorative plaque on the site of the glacier on Sunday that had been declared dead. The ceremony was a warning to the world about the dangers of global warming. The Nordic region's leaders signed a joint declaration to promote the UN's Sustainable Development Goals under the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Iceland's Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir said the declaration puts the region on a path to becoming the most sustainable in the world.
And I'm very happy to say that this morning we endorsed a new vision for the Nordic cooperation that prioritizes the areas that are central in our cooperation, not least on climate change.
The signing comes as the unity of the international community on global warming has been shattered by political changes in some countries, including the United States. Leaders of the business community also attended the informal meeting in Iceland's capital, Reykjavik.
It shows that the Nordic companies are at the very cutting edge when it comes to innovation and sustainability, and that's important for the region and for the world. I think initiatives like this are vital for reaching the goals in the Sustainable Development Goals.
European cities have suffered through record-breaking heat waves this summer, with several countries from Britain to Germany and France seeing new temperature highs.
Bowing to pressure from environmentally conscious consumers, British supermarkets have begun taking steps. They are stripping their shelves of plastic wrapping over concerns about saving the oceans from the waste. For details, watch this report.
Would you bring your own packaging to the supermarket? That's what customers are doing at this Waitrose store in Oxford in a trial to cut plastic use. Shoppers can also pay a deposit to borrow packaging if they don't have their own. It's a bid to cut down on the estimated 800,000 tonnes of single-use plastic used by UK supermarkets every year. And so far, it's proving popular.
If you could get everything that theoretically could be taken out without risking, health and safety or whatever, then it should be done.
Following such positive reaction, the trial has been extended and will soon roll out to 3 other stores. But for now, it remains just a test. Here at this shop in North London, though, the changes are permanent. Since November, plastic has been removed from more than 2,000 products. More paper and glass are being used, while cheese and fish are wrapped in a biodegradable film made from sugarcane.
We did this to show the other big supermarket chains that it wasn't as difficult as they said it was. And that if we can do this in 10 weeks, then surely with tiny resources, surely with all the resources they have, they can make a big move.
For environmental groups, such moves are steps in the right direction, but so far only half of the UK's top 10 supermarket chains have announced targets for plastic reduction.
We can't leave it up to the whims of well-meaning supermarkets to fix this problem. All the supermarkets need to move, and they need to move ambitiously and quickly. And that's why we're calling on the government to set legally binding targets for how much plastic we make and use in this country.
The UK government aims to eliminate avoidable plastic waste by 2042. But with an estimated 8 million tonnes of plastic polluting the oceans every year, environmentalists say that more should be done and sooner.
Couple of entertainment stories now. Hollywood film Angel Has Fallen has hit cinema screens after a star-studded premiere in Los Angeles. The film revolves around a Secret Service agent who is framed for an assassination attempt on the US president. Gerard Butler, Jada Pinkett Smith, Morgan Freeman and other cast members attended the premiere at the Regency Theatre. The Angel Has Fallen is the third in trilogy in which Butler plays Secret Service agent Mike Banning. In the movie, Butler's character turns to unlikely allies to help clear his name. protect his family, and save the U.S. from imminent danger. An exhibition of art inspired by iconic pop star Michael Jackson has opened in Finland's capital city of Helsinki. This report has the details.
The display titled Michael Jackson on the Wall brings together old and new works depicting the singer and his impact on popular culture. Works by American artist Andy Warhol and British potter Grayson Perry have been featured. The show of 90 works first hung in London's National Portrait Gallery in 2018 to widespread critical acclaim. It then toured Paris and Bonn before coming to Helsinki.
This exhibition and these artists are not celebrating Michael Jackson, but kind of analyzing his meaning in our culture through their works. So sometimes I feel when I look at their works that they are talking more about us and our society than Michael Jackson.
Many of the Jackson-inspired works veer between the gaudy and the grotesque. This includes an oversized golden statue of the megastar with his pet chimpanzee, Bubbles, by Paul McCarthy.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. China claims it produced nearly 150,000 sets of robots in 2018, which are over 38% of the world's total. This was announced by the Ministry of Industry and IT at the 2019 World Robot Conference in Beijing. On China's robot market, this report has the details. Take a look.
The Chinese Institute of Electronics released a report on the development of China's robot industry at the event. It shows the global robot market will hit $29.4 billion in 2019, and the local market will reach $8.68 billion. The report said the annual growth rate of China's robot market stands at 20.9% from 2014 to 2019. The Minister of Industry and Information Technology, Miao Wei, said robots promote high-quality development despite the challenges.
The development of the robotics industry faces many problems and challenges. Core technologies need to be further improved. Scenarios and areas of their application need to be broadened. Laws and regulations to prevent and control their risks need to be perfected.
This year's conference attracted 180 research institutions and robotics companies from around the world.
In football, Atlético Mineiro have won the first leg fixture of the Copa Sudamericana quarterfinal in Brazil. They defeated LA Equidad by 2-1. Equidad's midfielder David Camacho opened the scoring line with a 7th-minute penalty kick, but it was shortly equalized by a volley from Mineiro's Jair Rodriguez. Elias Trinidad led Mineiro to victory by scoring the winner in the 18th minute of the match. Both the sides will meet each other again for the second leg fixture on August the 28th. U.S. Major League Soccer has awarded an expansion franchise to the city of St. Louis. The club will begin playing in the MLS in 2022 as the league's 28th team. The expansion fee for the new team was set at $200 million. The new football franchise will join St. Louis's other celebrated sports teams. The Football Enterprises president, Caroline Kindle-Betts, was overjoyed at the decision.
Team in Major League Soccer. Congratulations.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.